Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, December 19th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. Well, today we have a number of feasts. They're going to take us to Chile in South America, to Spain, to France, and as well as Bavaria. So, briefly, in Bavaria, what do we have? We have Our Lady of Etalem, built by the Emperor Louis IV, who's called the Bavarian. Other than that, we don't have a whole lot of information regarding the feast. But we do know about the dedication of Our Lady of Marseille by Saint Lazarus, right? What does that mean? Well, the Abbé Orsini writes in his book, he says, it's the dedication of Our Lady of Marseille by Saint Lazarus in the presence of his two sisters, Mary Magdalene and Martha, and of the three holy prelates, Maximus, Torphimus, and Eutropius. What a great name, Eutropius. So we can expand out a little bit what he says. Now, there's a tradition that says that Lazarus of Bethany, he's the one who is the good friend of Jesus, along with his sisters, Marian, Magdalene, and Martha, and that he was the one raised from the dead by our Lord, right? Now, according to a long-standing tradition, Lazarus, Mary, and Martha were set adrift from Judea in a boat without sail, oars, or rudder. And it's said that this took place in 48 A.D., and our Lord personally led the boat, and it ended up in France, right? So what did they do? Well, as good Christians and disciples, they went about preaching the faith, right? It said that Lazarus went to Marseille, where he preached and converted the inhabitants, and eventually became their first bishop. But what happened? Well, during the Emperor Nero, there was a persecution of Christians, and St. Lazarus hid himself in the crypt, right? Later, the famous Abbey of St. Victor was constructed over that very crypt early in the 5th century, right? It was in that crypt that Lazarus was eventually buried after he was killed as a martyr, right? And so, to this day, the inhabitants of Marseille claim that they have the head of St. Lazarus and part of his forearm, right? So, when the Christians were no longer being persecuted, we're talking about much longer, much later, right? St. John Cassian built the church in honor of St. Victor over the burial place of St. Lazarus in around the year 430, right? The icon in that chapel was known as Our Lady of the Confession of the Martyrs, after St. Victor, St. Lazarus, and their martyred companions. So we jump over now to Spain, where we talk about Our Lady of Toledo and St. Ildefonsus, right? Remember, we've been hearing some meditations by St. Ildefonsus. Ildefonsus was born in 607 and died in 670, and was tutored by the great Isidore of Seville. And he became a Benedictine monk, even though his family didn't want it. He was made a deacon in 630, and in 657, he became archbishop in Toledo, right? Ildefonsus is considered one of the fathers of the church, Archbishop of Toledo, and patron saint of that city. And as a staunch defender of Mary's perpetual virginity, Ildefonsus is said to have received a chasuble from her hands. What do you mean by that? Well, I mean this. In 657, while he was praying matins, Our Lady appeared to St. Ildefonsus, accompanied by a great number of the blessed, and holding in her hands the book which he had composed in her honor, which we can suppose is this, crown of the Virgin Mary. And so the story is recounted like this. The Mother of God looked at St. Ildefonsus with a tender smile on her lips, and gestured for him to approach nearer. The saint obeyed, bowing deeply until he reached her feet. Once there, he fell on his knees again, hiding his face in his hands without even daring to look up. But then the Queen of Heaven began to speak to him sweetly. I have come to visit you because you have always taken care of my service and praises, and because with a great faith you have defended my honor. For all of this, I want to pay you in this life what I owe you. Take and enjoy this chasuble which I bring you from the treasury of my Son, to make use of it in your sacrifices, and to serve as a token of what is waiting for you in heaven when your mission has been fulfilled in this earthly life. While saying these words, with her own hands, she put on his shoulders a precious chasuble whose embroidery and fabric no human hand could ever hope to fashion. Dressed by the hand of Mary, the Archbishop rose as he bowed reverentially in gratitude. The Queen of Heaven then smiled, as if accepting the gratitude of her most loyal servant, and then, joined by her heavenly companions, vanished like a mist in the thin air. Now, it is said, right? The celestial gift is still preserved in Oviedo, right? Tradition claims that Ildefonsus' successor, Segrius, tried to use the vestment but died in the act of robing. Apparently it was just meant for Ildefonsus, not for Syagrius, right? Right, again, they say it's still there, but the garment is said to have been seen and touched by Herbert Losinga, the Bishop of Norwich, as late as the 11th century. And finally, we jump down to Santiago, Chile, where they celebrate Virgen del Carmen. You could say, like, well, why the Virgen del Carmen right now, Our Lady of Mount Carmel? Well, it's true, Our Lady of Mount Carmel wasn't officially declared patron of Chile until 1623. But devotion to her has been very strong, right? Ever since the liberators of Chile, San Martin and O'Higgins, yep, that's O'Higgins, yep, credited their 1818 victory to her. So in the capital, in Santiago, the Virgin celebration was moved from its traditional day of July 16th to the last Sunday in September, when a day for prayer for Chile follows the national holiday of September 18th, right? Her wooden statue, which came from France in 1822, resides in Chile's first parish church, El Sagrario, which is next to the cathedral. Why do we celebrate today, December 19th? Because the image was canonically crowned on December 19th of 1926. Yeah, December 19th, 1926. Usually on the last Sunday of September, it processes through the cities. And that is the story. For today's reading from The Imitation of Mary by Alexandre de Rouville, we begin with Book 1, Life and Virtues of the Blessed Virgin Mary, from her Immaculate Conception to the Birth of Jesus. And we begin with Chapter 1, Imitation of the Virtues of the Blessed Virgin. Happy those who do not abandon the way I have bidden them go. Happy those who listen to what I tell them. That's Proverbs 8, 32, 33. And who follow the models of virtue I offer them. In putting these words on the lips of Mary, the Church urges us to study the life of the Queen of Saints and to imitate her splendid example. Happy the man who imitates Our Lady, for in imitating her, he imitates Jesus, King and incomparable model of all virtue. The Blessed Virgin's life contains lessons for everyone. If we study it, we learn how to live in prosperity and adversity, prayer and work, honors and humiliations. We shall never attain the perfection she brought to every action, but our perfection can be measured by our closeness to her. You can claim to be Mary's servants. Do you really want to become like her in her sublime holiness? Then imitate, as far as you can, her lively faith, her prompt obedience, her deep humility, her selfless intentions, her generous love. Is there any one of you that cannot make it your aim, with the help of God's grace, to follow Mary's example in the practice of these virtues? Without such imitation, your love for her will be a weak thing indeed, and you cannot expect to receive evident proof of her special protection. True enough, you recite daily prayers in her honor. You give external signs of your devotion to her. You belong to a society that is especially consecrated to her. And all this binds her to ask God for the saving graces you need. But if your devotion does not take you a step further and lead you to imitate her virtues, then your devotion will not save you. The Philistines took possession of the ark of the Lord and adorned it with their gifts. But the ark did not become a source of blessing for them, because they continued to adore their idols as before. O Queen of all the virtues, is it not fitting that the one who loves you should do for you what he does for his friends in this world? We try to adapt ourselves to our friends' character, and to make their likes and dislikes our own. Such adaptation leads to a union of hearts. In fact, we may say that where there is no likeness, there can be no friendship. Your heart, Blessed Virgin, is utterly humble, pure, submissive to God's will, and zealous for his interests. How could it be united in the bonds of affection to a heart that is pleasure-seeking, proud, unresigned to God's will, and without zeal for his glory? The Apostle rightly says, "If you love me, then imitate me as I imitate Jesus." That's 1 Corinthians 4:16. If you are really my children, Mary says, then make your mother's spirit your own, the spirit of charity, peace, self-denial, and reverent love for God. Holy Virgin, from now on I will show you my loving devotion by imitating your virtues. There is no greater homage, no greater proof of love that I can give.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed our Marian podcast. As St. John Paul II teaches us, from Mary we learn to love Christ, her Son, the Son of God. Through her intercession, may we grow ever closer to him. We encourage you to share this with a loved one or friend and help spread our devotion to Mary. Thank you, and God bless.